Yuri a placeholder. The words kept ringing in Elena's head as she stood before 200 guests at the Grand Meridian. Her fingers tightened around the diamond necklace at her throat. The anniversary gift Marcus had given her an hour earlier with a kiss meant only for the cameras. Then she tore it off. Diamonds scattered across the marble like broken pieces of light, and the ballroom went silent. Marcus' face hardened. But Elena was already walking away, barefoot, leaving wet prints through spilled champagne. 12 years of forced smiles ended in that room. She did not know a dangerous man was watching from the corner. Outside, rain struck her face like needles, for the first time in years. The cold felt honest. Elena stumbled down the hotel steps, gasping as the rain dragged at her silver gown. She had no phone, no shoes, and no plan, only the need to get away before she lost her nerve. Elena, stop. Jessica's voice cut through the storm. Elena kept moving, her bare feet slapping against the freezing pavement. Behind her, the hotel glowed like Marcus' kingdom, and she knew he was already turning her into a story he could control. Jessica, his sister, caught her arm and spun her around. "What were you thinking?" she demanded. Elena pulled free. "I was thinking I am done." Her voice sounded too calm, almost unfamiliar. "He called me a placeholder." Jess. The rain filled the silence between them. Jessica looked away first. "He said I was just an expensive placeholder until he found someone worthy of his name," Elena said, her throat raw. Then he walked back inside, put his arm around Veronica, and toasted the people who make life worth living. Jessica's hand fell to her side. Elena stepped backward into the rain. "So yes, I humiliated him, and I'm not sorry. Tell him I'm never coming back." Jessica asked where she would go, and the question hit harder than the cold. Elena had nowhere. She turned and kept walking through the blurred Chicago streets. Memories came in flashes, quiet insults, fingers bruising her wrist, jokes about whether she was even fit to be a mother. She pressed a hand to her mouth and kept moving because stopping meant thinking. She had wanted children so badly, only to discover Marcus had secretly gotten a vasectomy years ago. That betrayal came back now with a weight that nearly folded her in half. Elena sank onto a wet bench, shaking as her soaked gown clung to her skin. Across the street, a couple hurried under an umbrella, the woman tucked safely into her partner's shoulder. Elena could not remember the last time Marcus had touched her without calculation. A young woman named Sophie stood nearby, holding out a thick jacket. "Yuri going to freeze. I work at a cafe around the corner. Come inside." Elena wanted to refuse, but her lips were turning numb. She followed Sophie inside, and when Sophie offered her something hot to drink, Elena had to admit she had no money. "I didn't ask if you had money," Sophie said gently. "I asked if you wanted something hot." Alone in the booth, Elena pressed a towel to her face. She was 34 years old, and felt as if Marcus had stripped away every piece of the person she used to be. He had made her quit teaching. He had pushed her friends away one by one. He had called it protection until she stopped recognizing control. "Rough night?" a man asked. Elena looked up and saw him standing beside the booth in an expensive dark suit, his expression unreadable. "That's one way to put it," she whispered. He asked if he could sit, then added that he would leave if she wanted. After 12 years of orders, that small choice almost broke her. She nodded. "I am Dominic," he said. "Why do you care?" Elena asked. Dominic rested his hands on the table where she could see them. "Because I saw enough tonight." The answer was too direct to dismiss. She stared into her tea until the story began spilling out. 12 years of shrinking, apologizing, and pretending, while her husband paraded his mistress around and called her a placeholder. Dominic's jaw tightened. "Marcus Martinez." Elena looked up. "You know him." "I was at the hotel," he said. "I saw you tear off the necklace. And I heard him laughing after you left." Fresh anger cut through her exhaustion. "He told people you were hormonal." Dominic added. "That's why I followed from a distance. I wanted to make sure you didn't disappear into his version of the night." Dominic typed a number into his phone and slid it across the table. "Use this if you need real help." Elena stared at the screen. "You don't know me." "No," he said. "But I know men like him. By morning, he report you missing. Tell the police you unstable, and make himself look like a worried husband." Elena's stomach tightened because she could already picture it. "How do you know that?" Something cold moved through Dominic's face. Because men who care about image all use the same tools. Fear, pity, paperwork. He pulled several $100s from his wallet and placed it on the table. Find a safe hotel. Don't use a card he can trace. Elena did not touch the money right away. Taking help felt dangerous. Not taking it felt worse. He placed a plain business card beside the cash. When you ready to fight back instead of just running. Call. Elena shook her head. I can pay you. Dominic's voice lowered. Then T. Make one decision tonight that belongs to you. He stood and disappeared into the rain. Sophie returned with tea and quietly said Dominic was intense. But he had helped people before. Just be careful, she added. Men with power always come with shadows. Elena wrapped both hands around the warm mug. Marcus was probably already moving. Already turning her escape into his tragedy. She picked up the heavy card and felt its edge press into her palm. She was still terrified. But fear no longer felt like proof that she should go back. It felt like proof that she had finally left. Elena's first night of freedom began with Marcus' voice still echoing in her skull. For years, he had taught her to doubt every reaction, to call pain sensitivity and fear drama. But the memory of the coat room stayed clear. His quiet words calling her a placeholder, until he found an upgrade, had cracked something open that could not be sealed again. She tucked Dominic's card against her skin and let Sophie's tea warm her hands. In the small hotel room, Sophie helped her find. Elena pushed a chair beneath the door handle. She locked the bathroom window, checked the hallway twice, then sat on the carpet because the bed felt too exposed. She did not cry. She watched the door until dawn, learning the shape of a room where Marcus was not allowed in. Elena had left, but leaving was only the first step. With Dominic's card clenched in one hand, she barely slept. At sunrise, violent pounding at the door jolted her awake. Chicago police stood outside. Marcus had already turned concern into a weapon. A missing person report made him look at it and forced her out of hiding. Panic rose as the officers asked her to open the door. With shaking hands, she called Dominic. His voice was calm but not casual. He told her to keep the chain on and say she was contacting legal counsel. I don't have a lawyer, she whispered. I can call someone, he said, but you have to speak first. Tell them you are safe, and that you are not going anywhere with your husband. Dominic did not let her hide behind silence. Over the phone, he repeated the words until she could say them without breaking. I am safe. I am not missing. I am contacting my attorney. Elena swallowed hard. I'm not the one who did something wrong, she added, almost to herself. The sentence felt strange, then necessary. Her hand shook as she opened the door, only as far as the chain allowed. She told the officers she would speak to them in the lobby, with her attorney present. They said Marcus only wanted to know she was safe. Elena held the door steady. I am safer now than I have been in 12 years. The words left her mouth before fear could stop them. For once, she did not take them back. Minutes later, Rebecca Ortiz arrived. She was sharp, controlled, and dressed like someone who had won arguments before breakfast. Her eyes moved across the room, noting the chair under the handle, the wet dress, the bare feet. Marcus and the police were downstairs, she confirmed, and Elena needed to follow one rule: verify that she was safe, but explain nothing more. Rebecca had brought clean clothes, not out of kindness alone, but strategy. Marcus would use the soaked gown and frightened face as evidence of his story, in jeans and a plain sweater. Elena looked less like a runaway and more like a woman making a decision. Downstairs, Marcus waited in the lobby with wounded eyes and a camera-ready face. Elena saw the performance before he even opened his arms. Marcus rushed forward with practiced desperation. I've been out of my mind with worry. Rebecca stepped between them. Rebecca Ortiz, Mrs. Martinez's attorney. For half a second, Marcus' mask slipped, and Elena saw the rage underneath. It was not grief. It was possession losing its grip. The police interview was brief. Though one officer kept glancing at Marcus with sympathy, Elena answered only what she had to. She was alive. She was safe. She had left by choice. As she turned to go, Marcus caught her arm. To anyone watching, it looked gentle. To Elena, who knew every change in his pressure, it was a warning. "You re-throwing everything away," he whispered. This time she looked down at his hand instead of pretending it did not hurt. Marcus tried to shrink her escape into an emotional outburst, dismissing his cruelty as a drunken mistake. Elena looked straight at him. "You called me a placeholder," she said, loud enough for Rebecca to hear. "Now I am leaving the space you kept me in." His fingers tightened around her arm. Rebecca's voice cut through the lobby. "Let go, or the next conversation happens with an assault charge." Marcus released her, the false concern draining from his face. In the black sedan outside, Elena began to shake as the adrenaline left her body. "He's going to destroy me," she whispered. Rebecca opened her tablet. "He will try." "That is different." Elena wiped rain from her hair, took one breath, and asked what she needed to do first. The mystery around Dominic only deepened when Rebecca mentioned his name without surprise. Elena asked who he really was, but Rebecca did not romanticize him. Dominic had resources, enemies, and reasons of his own for now. Elena needed facts every affair. Every humiliation, every hidden rule, every quiet act of control. They were not building a revenge fantasy. They were building a case strong enough to survive Marcus' influence. Elena feared his friends, his judges, his money. Rebecca did not dismiss the danger. She only said they would document everything before he could twist it. Elena had not simply hired a lawyer. She had stepped into a fight where truth needed evidence, timing, and nerve. Rebecca placed a recorder on the table. "Start at the beginning." The beginning looked different once Elena said it out loud. Her father had owed Marcus a crushing debt, and Marcus forgave it in exchange for a date with his daughter. To a naive 20-year-old, it had felt like a sweeping romance. Marcus brought flowers to her school, remembered her coffee order, and once waited outside in the snow just to walk her home. That was the part no one understood. He had not looked cruel then, he had looked devoted. Then the illusion cracked the day after the wedding. On a balcony in Bali, Elena made one small suggestion, and Marcus answered with contempt. Her purpose, he said, was to look beautiful and stay quiet. She laughed weakly because she thought he might be joking. He was not. The isolation had been gradual enough to look reasonable from the outside. First, Marcus questioned her friendships. Then he criticized her clothes, her meals, her schedule, even the way she spoke at dinners. Whenever she cried, he would soften, kiss her forehead, and say he only pushed because he wanted the world to respect her. Those moments made the cruelty harder to name. By the third year, Elena had become a ghost in expensive dresses, smiling beside him while disappearing from herself. He was careful not to leave marks. But once, 2 years earlier, the mask slipped. When she tried to leave after an argument, he dragged her back inside and left bruises on both arms. His doctor wrote a prescription for anxiety pills and never asked how she got hurt. "I stopped counting the affairs," Elena told Rebecca. "That was part of it. He wanted me to know I had no power." She admitted she had been fading for years. That night, "I decided I'd rather walk into the rain with nothing than go back upstairs and smile beside him." Rebecca let the silence sit. Then she explained what they had to prove. The pattern. Not just the worst night. The threats. The money. The humiliation. The sweetness that appeared only when Elena was close to leaving. Dominic had some leads on Marcus' business, but Elena's marriage was a different map, and only she knew its rooms. She would have to remember details she had spent years trying to forget. She nodded and asked for another sheet of paper. Elena's hands trembled as she wrote names, dates, restaurants, hotels, anything she could remember. She still did not understand why Dominic had stepped in. Rebecca gave a careful answer. He did not like men who used power to trap women. And Marcus had been on his radar for business reasons long before Elena walked out. As they approached the high-rise, Elena caught her reflection in the glass doors. Without the designer armor Marcus had chosen for her, she looked pale, tired, and real. For years she had worn a mask so well that she had nearly forgotten the face beneath it. She straightened her sweater, lifted her chin, and walked inside. She was still afraid, but she was no longer performing obedience. Sitting across from Rebecca, with the recorder between them, Elena felt like she was confessing to the truth of her own life. Rebecca began with the finances and exposed the machinery behind Marcus's control. His empire was worth $40 million. Yet Elena received $500 a week. He called it simplicity. He told her she needed nothing in her own name. He had even convinced her to empty her premarital savings, calling it proof that they were one. Elena remembered standing at the bank, smiling while something inside her tightened. Within a month of marriage, she could not have bought a plane ticket without him knowing. Control had not arrived as a locked door. It had arrived as paperwork she signed while trying to be loved. Elena had never called her marriage isolation until Rebecca did. Marcus did not need constant violence to keep her trapped. He used fear, then comfort, then fear again. He threatened to ruin her father's business and smear her sanity across Chicago, then brought her tea at midnight and called her his fragile girl. Elena rubbed at a faint old scar near her wrist, suddenly aware of how much she had trained herself not to react. Then the door opened and Dominic stepped inside, in daylight. He looked sharper and more dangerous, but he did not take over the room. He nodded to Rebecca, then to Elena. "Only if you want me here," he said. Elena studied him for a moment. "Sit," she said. The choice was hers, and she felt it. Dominic sat beside Elena, careful not to crowd her. He did not soften the news. Marcus had already gone to the papers, presenting himself as a devastated husband. He claimed Elena had been battling severe depression, that she was paranoid, that she refused help. The photograph beside the article showed him looking worn and deeply concerned. It was a clean performance. By making her seem erratic, Marcus was attacking her credibility before she spoke. Elena read the headline and felt heat crawl up her neck. Her hands shook, but she forced herself to keep reading. He was not trying to find her. He was building a public version of her that could be dragged home without anyone asking why she ran. Dominic watched panic rise in her face but did not tell her to calm down. Rebecca handed Elena a draft statement exposing the financial control, the cruelty, and the affairs. Making private wounds public felt like being undressed in front of strangers. Elena pushed the paper away, then pulled it back. "If I say this, he'll call me a liar. He already is," Rebecca said. That landed. Elena read the statement again, crossed out 2 lines that sounded too polished, and rewrote them in her own words. She would not beg to be believed. She would state what happened. Dominic warned that Marcus's circle would answer hard. Elena looked at the paper until the letters blurred, then signed her initials at the bottom. Elena's voice hardened as she demanded to know who Dominic really was. He did not give her a heroic answer. He had unconventional methods. Friends in places respectable men pretended not to know, and a habit of finding secrets powerful people thought were buried. "I am not clean, but I want to lie to you about that." Elena sat with the moral weight of it. Marcus lived in the light, protected by money, reputation, and bought smiles. She had followed every polite rule for 12 years, and those rules had kept her trapped. If the system was tilted, she could not afford to be naive. She looked at Dominic's steady face and understood the difference. Marcus had hidden his danger. Dominic was naming his. The photograph spread across the desk formed a timeline of betrayals. Dominic had gathered enough to challenge the life Marcus thought he could hide. But Elena was the one who recognized the smallest details. The worst image was from a recent dinner. On Veronica's finger was Elena's grandmother's ring. The heirloom Marcus had claimed was stolen. Elena reached for the photo, then stopped before touching it. Her grandmother had worn that ring while baking bread, while holding Elena's hand after nightmares, while telling her never to let anyone make her small. Rebecca tapped the jeweler's receipts. This was not only adultery. It was theft of marital property, and it could be proven. Elena's sadness sharpened into something useful. Marcus' arrogance had left a trail. They had enough to damage Marcus. But releasing it meant crossing a line they could not uncross. Dominic warned her that once the statement went public, Marcus' retaliation would be vicious. He would send private investigators after her, twist old moments, and invent dirt if he could not find any. Elena thought of 12 years spent becoming the perfect wife, the perfect ornament, the perfect prisoner. Let him look. There were no secret scandals. Only a woman who had been too ashamed to admit she was trapped. "I want the press conference," she said. Rebecca searched her face to make sure it was not panic speaking. Elena repeated it. I want it. 5 minutes under bright lights would not fix her life. But silence had already cost too much. The legal strike began with 3 things Elena could understand: safety money, and proof. Rebecca would request protection, demand full asset disclosure, and force Marcus to explain why a wife in a $40 million marriage had been living on an allowance. The number attached to the settlement still sounded unreal. But Rebecca made it clear this was not a gift. It was a record of what Marcus had taken. The business files could wait until the first door opened. 1 step, Rebecca said, turning the tablet toward Elena. Today we keep him from pulling you back. Tomorrow we follow the money. Elena nodded. For the first time. The fight looked less like a storm and more like a staircase. Rebecca explained that Marcus' business was not as clean as his public image. Bribes, pressure, quiet favors. His success rested on things that could not survive scrutiny. Elena listened. Then asked the question that mattered most to her. Was I just useful because I'm his wife? Dominic did not answer too quickly. He had seen what happened in the coat room. He had watched Marcus strip her dignity away, then laugh when she left. That made him angry. But Marcus had already been an enemy for other reasons. You are not a tool, he said. You are a witness. And you are a person he underestimated. Elena held his gaze. She did not need flattery. She needed the truth. And for once, she believed she was getting it. Dominic's honesty hit Elena harder than any promise would have. He had seen her throw the necklace away. And to him, that meant she still had a part of herself Marcus had not killed. He warned her the days ahead would be brutal. Marcus would use friends, family, money, and media as weapons. Then Rebecca handed her a card for a secure apartment arranged under a different name. Dominic did not touch it. You can refuse, he said. Elena looked at the card for a long time. I'll take it because I need safety, she said, not because I belong to anyone. Something like respect moved across his face. Good, accepting help was not surrender. Tonight it was strategy. Family can be one of the heaviest chains. Just as Elena began to find her footing, her father called. Ready to assert the authority he had never used to protect her. She hesitated because she already knew what was coming. He had chosen financial comfort over his daughter as well-being for years. Rebecca quietly started recording with Elena's permission. When the call connected, her father's booming voice filled the room, skipping concern and going straight to accusation. He repeated Marcus' version, saying she had lost her mind and abandoned a powerful husband for a lawyer. Elena closed her eyes. The betrayal was familiar, but hearing it spoken still hurt. She gripped the edge of the table and refused to apologize for answering the phone. Elena refused to let her father reduce years of control to a prideful argument between husband and wife. She described the shape of her life. The money Marcus controlled, the friends he drove away, the quiet rules that followed her everywhere. It was a prison, she said. Her father defended the warden. He used his own difficult marriage as proof that suffering was simply part of commitment. Then he warned that Marcus would ruin her. Elena looked at Rebecca, then at Dominic, then back at the phone for once. The room held people who were not afraid of Marcus' shadow. Maybe he will try, she said, but I'm done helping him do it. Her father went quiet, and that silence told her how much had changed. Her father played his last card, warning her about Dominic's underworld ties. He said Dominic was the real danger. Elena's answer was steady. At least Dominic tells me he has teeth. Marcus smiled while he swallowed my life. Defeated, her father turned cruel, predicting she would crawl back once the money was gone. Elena felt the old child in her flinch, the one who still wanted approval. Then she ended the call. The silence afterward hurt, but it was clean. Rebecca reminded her that support was not proven by blood. It was proven by action. Elena did not answer. She walked to the window, pressed her hand against the cold glass, and let herself grieve the father she had needed, but never really had. As Elena left, Rebecca offered one last piece of advice. Stop apologizing for taking up space. The safe apartment was a guarded high-rise overlooking Chicago. Inside, Elena found a room that actually seemed lived in. Nothing like the sterile museum Marcus had made her maintain. There were worn books, a handwritten note explaining the security codes, and a kitchen stocked with real food instead of Marcus' joyless restrictions. She touched the fresh flowers on the table and almost laughed because no one had asked what color arrangement would photograph best. The place was not hers. Not yet, but it did not demand a performance. Elena opened a cabinet, found a chipped mug, and held it like a small rebellion. Elena poured a glass of wine and stood by the windows, looking down at the glowing grid of the city. Somewhere below, Marcus was scrambling to protect his image, spinning lies as fast as he could, for the first time in 12 years. Fear was not the only thing in her chest. Anger sat beside it, clean and focused. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dominic, checking whether she had arrived safely. She thanked him, then asked the question she could not let go of. Had he been at the hotel by chance? Or because of Marcus? His reply took a long moment. Then it came. Because of Marcus. Elena read the words twice. Marcus had enemies he never mentioned. She wondered what else her marriage had hidden from her. Elena did not know whether she wanted revenge or justice. The two felt dangerously close when the wound was fresh. She finished her wine and stood in the quiet apartment while ordinary lives moved in the streets below. The next morning, hard knocking broke the silence. Rebecca stood in the hallway with coffee and a grim expression. The game had changed. Marcus had just held a press conference, performing the role of devastated husband with frightening precision. He was offering a $50,000 reward for Elena's safe return. It was cruel and clever at once, by pretending she was a danger to herself. He made his control look like love. Elena watched the clip once, then pushed the phone back. What do we do? Marcus was building a prison out of public pity, but Rebecca had no intention of letting him finish it. She pushed coffee into Elena's hands and told her they were holding their own press conference in 30 minutes. Elena's first instinct was to refuse. Then she looked at the headline again and saw the trap tightening. At the podium, her voice trembled, but it did not break. She described the control, the money, the affairs, and the way Marcus had slowly stripped her life down until she needed permission to breathe. She did not tell every detail. Some wounds were still hers, but she told enough. When reporters erupted with questions, Rebecca stepped forward and ended it. Elena walked away before anyone could turn her pain into entertainment. One reporter pushed through the noise and asked how she responded to Marcus calling her mentally unstable. Elena stopped. She looked straight into the camera. Gaslighting, she explained, was how abusers made victims doubt themselves, so no one else would believe them. I am not unstable, she said. I am leaving. That is what scares him. In the car afterward, she shook so hard Rebecca handed her both coffee cups to steady her hands. Within the hour, Marcus fired back through lawyers, threatening slander suits and circulating a detailed fiction about her erratic behavior. But the crack in his image had appeared. People began asking why a loving husband needed a reward, a press conference, and a legal threat to bring his wife home. The internet caught fire, and Elena was no longer standing entirely alone. Other women came forward with their own stories about Marcus. Former employees and past lovers described the same pattern: charm, control, fear, and punishment. By afternoon, 3 sponsors cut ties with his charity. His power was bleeding in public. That night, Dominic met her with wine and a plan that was simpler than she expected. Rebecca would push through court. Dominic's contacts would look for people Marcus had hurt. Elena would write down every memory she had dismissed as meaningless. No one piece would destroy him. Together they might. As Elena opened her old calendar, she saw a dinner date she had almost forgotten, and her hand went still. Dominic asked if bringing Marcus down troubled her. Elena thought of the employees he ruined, the women he silenced, and the 12 years she had spent invisible. No, she said, then surprised herself by adding, but I don't want to become him. Dominic accepted that without argument. Men like Marcus did not fall quietly. At 2 a.m, a phone call split the room open. Dominic stepped out, and when he returned his face had gone hard. Marcus had Elena's father arrested for fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. It was retaliation, but also a message. Her father was vulnerable because he had taken Marcus money for years. The drive to the police station felt endless. Elena pressed her nails into her palm until half moons appeared. Elena knew her father was selfish and weak, but she could not believe he was a criminal. Marcus had to have set him up. At the station, Rebecca delivered the news with no softness to spare. Bail was set at $2 million, and her father could face 15 years in prison. Near the holding cells, Elena felt the walls closing around her throat. "This is my fault," she whispered. Dominic cut through the guilt at once. Her father had taken Marcus money for years. Marcus was cruel enough to use it. But that did not make Elena responsible. She walked to the vending machine, bought a bottle of water with trembling hands, and drank half of it before she could speak again. "Then we find out what is real." Rebecca returned with a harsher possibility. The evidence against Elena's father was heavy. Bank records, wire transfers, documents that looked real. Either Marcus had planted everything perfectly, or her father had committed the crimes and Marcus had saved the proof for the right moment. The morning arraignment became a media circus. Seeing her father in an orange jumpsuit, frail and ashamed, twisted something inside Elena. The judge set bail at $1 million they did not have, and her father was led back to a concrete cell. Outside, reporters swarmed, shouting that Elena was using the divorce to distance herself from dirty family money. Elena nearly answered. Rebecca touched her elbow. "Not here." Elena bit the words back and kept walking. By the time they reached the car, the damage had already spread across the city. Noon headlines painted Elena as the wife of a real estate mogul, fleeing disgrace while her father's crimes came to light. Marcus was rewriting the story again, casting himself as the wounded victim, back in the apartment. Elena stared at her phone as her life became a headline she barely recognized. "He's winning," she whispered. Dominic gently took the phone from her, then set it face down instead of taking it away. "Only if we freeze." Action arrived with Rebecca, who carried a folder of messy financial records tied to Marcus. It was not proof yet. It was a thread. Elena leaned over the pages. "Then we pull it." The folder did not solve anything by itself. It showed strange payments, shell companies, and names Elena half recognized from dinners where she had been expected to smile and stay quiet. Marcus had once laughed with one of those men over whiskey, then kissed Elena's temple and told her not to worry her pretty head about business. Now that man's signature sat beside a payment no one could explain. 2 days later, Marcus played his next card. He sat for an interview with polished tears, claiming he had hidden her father's theft to spare Elena pain. The clip spread fast. Elena watched it once, then opened her notebook and wrote down 3 names from Marcus' late-night calls. One of them made Rebecca stop breathing for a second. Marcus was a master at building his own myth. He twisted the story until he looked like the devoted savior, and Elena looked reckless, ungrateful, unstable. "He is making himself the hero," she said. Dominic stood near the window. "Let him climb higher." That night, a message lit up Dominic's phone. A former business partner named Richard was ready to talk. They met in the freezing concrete of a parking garage. Richard was shivering, furious, and afraid. Marcus had ruined him, he said, and he had waited 5 years for a chance to return the favor. Elena listened carefully, not letting anger make her careless. "Why now?" she asked. Richard looked at her. "Because you made him bleed in public before that. No one thought it was possible." Richard handed over a flash drive with records of Marcus paying off city officials and a corrupt judge. Elena realized Marcus's obsession with control had become his weakness. He had documented everything because he trusted fear more than loyalty. Richard's hands shook as he admitted he had received threats and feared for his family. Dominic stepped aside to arrange protection, but Rebecca stayed with the evidence. Scrolling through dates, names, and payments, Elena watched her expression change from caution to focus. Corruption did not look dramatic on the screen. It looked like transfers, invoices, coded notes, and signatures from men who smiled at charity dinners. Elena wrapped her arms around herself and understood that Marcus' cruelty at home had been part of something much larger. Richard confessed his part in the corruption. He had kept the files as insurance, and he was willing to cooperate if it meant seeing Marcus fall. Looking at Elena, he revealed that Marcus had once planted false evidence to destroy his marriage. Over the next week, the work became less like a thriller and more like exhaustion. Rebecca team sorted records. Investigators traced accounts. Elena built a timeline from old calendars, charity invitations, receipts, and memories Marcus had assumed were harmless. Some nights she fell asleep over folders with ink on her fingers. Then Marcus filed a countersuit accusing her of theft and framing her escape as an affair with Dominic. It was ugly, predictable, and loud enough to make headlines by morning. Dominic did not flinch at the accusations. It fits the story he wants, he said. Unstable wife runs off with a mobster. Then he asked the question Elena had been avoiding. Did she still care what people thought? Elena wanted to say no, but the lie stuck in her throat. She had spent her life performing, becoming smaller, prettier, quieter, safer. It had earned her nothing except a beautiful cage. Dominic told her she did not have to look perfect to be believed. Elena walked to the mirror and studied the tired woman staring back. Her hair was loose, her eyes swollen, her sweater wrinkled. She did not look like Marcus's wife. For the first time, that felt like relief. Let Marcus spin his illusions, Dominic said. We keep building weight. The turning point came Tuesday morning when Rebecca entered quietly instead of bursting in. That scared Elena more. She set a folder on the table and said the corrupt judge Marcus had bought was negotiating with federal prosecutors. He was prepared to testify if the deal held. Elena's breath caught. The case was no longer only her word against Marcus' image. Someone inside his world was reaching for a way out. It was not a miracle, not a rescue. Just one frightened man choosing his own survival. Elena sat down slowly. Marcus could lose. Then Rebecca opened the folder and said, but he knows it too. Rebecca's 6-hour negotiation was a lesson in letting Marcus trap himself. He believed he was buying Elena's silence with a $25 million settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. He thought he was locking her into a cage made of paper. Can I still testify? Elena asked. Rebecca's smile sharpened. The agreement covered only the divorce. A federal subpoena would override it. They were letting Marcus think he had won because pride made him careless. Sign only if you want the marriage over, Rebecca said. Elena took the pen. Her hand hovered for 1 second, grieving the 20-year-old girl who had believed his charm. Then she signed. With one stroke, 12 years of captivity ended on paper. The rest would end in truth. Elena stared at the ink and felt no triumph. Freedom did not arrive like music. It arrived quietly, leaving a hollow space where fear had lived too long. Rebecca said she was free. But Elena did not know how to stand inside that word. She moved through the day in a fog until she found Dominic waiting in his car. He took one look at her and did not ask her to celebrate. He drove her to a glass and steel building in River North. You need a place that is yours, he said, opening the door to an empty penthouse filled with light. Elena stepped inside and heard only silence. No Marcus calling from another room. No rules waiting in the air. The quiet frightened her more than she expected. Dominic explained that the safe apartment had only been temporary. The penthouse was available if she wanted it, with paperwork in her name and no conditions attached. He held out the keys. Elena stared at them as if they might bite. Years with Marcus had trained her to search every kindness for a hidden hook. I didn't know how to be anything but his wife, she admitted. Dominic did not answer with a speech. He placed the keys on the counter and stepped back. Then make one choice that belongs only to you. Elena looked around the empty space. She walked to the counter, picked up the keys, and closed her fist around them. Not because Dominic offered, because she decided. In that empty penthouse, Elena finally broke. She cried for the years she had lost, for the woman she had abandoned, and for the strange terror of a life that might still belong to her. Dominic stayed near the doorway until she asked him to sit. He did. He did not touch her until she reached for his sleeve. That evening, surrounded by a few clothes and her divorce papers, Elena looked out over the Chicago skyline. Somewhere below, Marcus was probably toasting what he believed was his victory, blind to the case forming around him. Then her phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca. Her father's charges had been dropped, and he wanted to meet. The old tension returned at once. Freedom, Elena realized, did not erase old wounds. It only gave her room to face them. For years, her father had used Marcus as a financial lifeline and left Elena trapped in her gilded cage. Still, she agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near the courthouse. He looked smaller than she remembered, drained of pride. "Thank you," he said quietly. Elena reminded him that his freedom was only a side effect of the divorce agreement. Silence sat between them. "Was it real?" she asked. His hands trembled. His business had been failing, and desperation had pushed him into stealing. Then he took a loan from Marcus, and the loan became a leash. Marcus had used the debt, planted more evidence, and waited for the right moment. Elena listened without rescuing him from the shame. For once, he had to carry his own truth. "I chose money over my daughter," her father said, his voice breaking. It was the failure he could no longer soften. Elena had come ready to strike him with anger, but watching him sit there, small and ashamed, did not give her the satisfaction she expected. "I can't forgive you yet," she said, "but I understand more than I did." Marcus had built invisible prisons and in different ways. They had both lived inside them. Her father said he was proud she had escaped. Then, late and imperfect, his protective instinct surfaced. He warned her that men like Dominic rarely helped without wanting something. Elena did not dismiss the warning. She folded it away with everything else she would examine later on her own terms. Elena did not let her father's fear make her doubt every kindness. "Dominic has treated my choices with more respect in 2 weeks than Marcus did in 12 years, she said. "That does not mean I belong to him." Her father looked down, and for the first time he did not argue. When he finally apologized for everything he had failed to see and everything he had chosen not to see. The words reached a place in Elena that had been starving for years. Still, an apology could not repair a decade of betrayal. She told him she needed to rebuild her life without anyone managing it for her. They parted on the sidewalk, both changed and still wounded. Elena walked away slowly, resisting the old urge to turn back and comfort him. Watching her father leave, Elena felt the old dynamic shift. The wound was not healed, but at least the lie had been named. Back at the penthouse, Dominic arrived with takeout and news. Federal agents had visited Marcus' office that morning with warrants. The divorce had given investigators another door into his records. Dominic lifted his drink to cold revenge. Elena looked at him and corrected him. To justice. As the Chicago sunset turned the sky orange and pink, quiet settled over the room. Justice was not only about watching Marcus fall. It was also Elena eating noodles from a paper carton in a home he did not choose, wearing clothes he had never approved, breathing without waiting for permission. For the first time, the horizon did not look like the walls of a cell, in the safety of that room. Elena asked Dominic for the truth behind his protection. His answer was grief. He told her about his younger sister, Maria, who had been trapped by a man much like Marcus. "I could save her," he said, his voice going flat. The manipulation had gone too deep, and Maria had taken her own life. Dominic looked at Elena as if he hated how much the stories resembled each other. Bringing down Marcus was not charity to him. It was personal, maybe too personal. Elena appreciated the honesty more than any noble answer. Grief. She knew could make people dangerous. It could also make them stay when others looked away. Elena took Dominic's hand, not to comfort him completely, but to acknowledge the wound he had shown her. He admitted he was not pure in all of this. Maybe his hunger for revenge was its own form of control, but he would not stop until Marcus paid for what he had done. Elena listened, then said quietly, "I need this to be more than revenge." Dominic nodded. 3 days later, the federal subpoena arrived. Holding it in her hands, she knew there was no going back. Rebecca reminded her that she could still limit what she shared in certain areas. Elena refused to hide behind another technicality. She wanted to testify. She wanted every rotten secret Marcus had buried exposed. The decision frightened her, but it also steadied her. When Dominic ended a phone call, the room turned heavy. Marcus was moving money before federal agents could freeze it. Worse, someone had been asking questions about Elena's exact location. Control did not disappear just because the relationship ended. Dominic tightened security, but Elena refused to be left out of the conversation. She asked what entrances were covered, who had access, and where she should go if the building was compromised. Her hands trembled as she wrote it down. It was easy to imagine Marcus as something larger than human, too powerful to defeat. Then Rebecca showed her the formal notice of the federal investigation. It was not a headline anymore. It was a case number, a prosecutor's name, and a file that kept growing. The story broke carefully. through filings and confirmed reports rather than rumor. Within hours, the polished image of Marcus Martinez began to crack on national television. Board members disappeared, deals stalled. People who had once praised him suddenly remembered they had doubts. Elena watched it happen from the penthouse. But justice did not feel as clean as she had imagined. Seeing an abuser exposed left a hollow ache instead of victory. Then her encrypted phone rang from an unknown number. She should not have answered, but some old part of her still reacted to him. Marcus' voice slid into her ear, soft at first, almost tender. "Lena," he said, using the name he had whispered when she was 20. "Meet me or I start with your father." The cruelty of a manipulator is that he knows exactly where to press. Marcus did not only threaten Elena, he attacked her family. His voice stayed gentle as he listed her father's alleged sins: secret gambling debts, a 5-year affair, $50,000 stolen from a pension fund. Then he suggested her mother had died of a broken heart. The old softness made the threat feel even colder. The phone slipped from Elena's trembling fingers. Dominic caught it before it hit the floor. Elena repeated the threat, each word tasting worse than the last. She knew it was a trap meant to shake her before testimony. But doubt had already entered. Some lies hurt because they might contain a piece of truth. Elena hated herself for wanting to know, and hated Marcus more for knowing she would. Dominic immediately began planning a countermeasure. If Marcus wanted a meeting, they would not give him privacy. There would be witnesses, recorders, and security within sight. Rebecca arrived and argued against it. Walking into an ambush before grand jury testimony was exactly what Marcus wanted. He needed to break Elena emotionally. Elena listened, then grabbed her coat anyway. "I spent 12 years not knowing what was true in my own life," she said. "I am done letting him use my ignorance against me." Dominic insisted on coming. Rebecca swore under her breath and started making calls. Real allies did not always agree with her choices, but they respected that the choice was hers. At the hotel, security blended into the background and covered every exit. Marcus waited in the corner with a scotch, immaculate in his suit and wearing the same devastating smile that had once charmed Elena. Now it only made her stomach turn. He mocked Dominic as her guard dog. Rebecca stepped forward and announced that every word would be recorded. Marcus only smiled wider. He still believed every room belonged to him. Dominic stood behind Elena, but Elena raised a hand without looking back. She did not want to appear shielded. She wanted to face Marcus with her own spine. Marcus looked her over and said the divorce suited her. Then he claimed he had come to offer her a real choice. From him, the word choice sounded like a threat. Marcus slid a thick folder across the polished table. It was a weapon dressed as evidence, supposedly filled with proof of her father's affairs and theft. Before Elena could open it, Marcus softened his voice and reminded her of their first winter together, when he had carried her through snow because her shoes hurt. "I loved you in my way," he said. "I protected you from ugliness." Then came the real message. Drop the federal testimony, or he would burn her family name to the ground. Rebecca called it extortion. Marcus dismissed it as business. Elena looked at the folder, then at his face. The tenderness had been another tool. For the first time, she saw how empty he was without control. Elena reached for the folder, her voice shaking with denial. Dominic caught her wrist gently and told her not to hand Marcus the reaction he wanted. But certainty had its own gravity. She pulled the folder open. Inside were bank statements, photos of unfamiliar women, and records of $50,000 moved into personal accounts. Marcus leaned back and confessed, almost proudly, that he collected leverage the way other men collected art. People were not people to him. They were assets, weaknesses, pressure points. Dominic stepped forward, furious, but Elena spoke first. "You kept this for years," Marcus smiled. "I keep everything useful." The words landed like ice. Even love, family, grief, everything became a tool in his hands. "I need to think," Elena whispered. "You have until noon tomorrow," Marcus said. "Tell the FBI you're done testifying, or this goes to the press." He stood over her. "You look beautiful when you rebroken." Then he walked away, leaving the folder on the table like a live grenade. Elena could not breathe. Rebecca was speaking, but the words slid past her. Dominic gripped the back of a chair. forcing himself not to chase Marcus through the room. "He may be lying," he said. Elena corrected him through clenched teeth. "Then prove it." That one sentence changed the energy at the table. Rebecca gathered the folder. Dominic called for an analyst. Elena stood on shaking legs and refused to collapse where Marcus could still see. They rushed Elena back to the penthouse, but her mind stayed at that table. Marcus had found the deepest weakness and driven a blade into it. Her father arrived quickly, panic written across his face. Elena slid the folder toward him without speaking. His color drained as he read. "Is it real?" "Dad," she asked. His voice cracked. The gambling was real. A shadow from years ago. He had borrowed from the pension fund but paid it back. Then came the affair. "I am not proud of it," he said, trembling. Her mother had never known. Elena felt the room empty of air. She wanted to shout. Instead, she sat very still, because if she moved too fast, she might break something she could never repair. "I was losing her, and I couldn't handle it." Her father wept. He had paid the money back in cash, leaving no clean paper trail. It had been a terrible mistake. Not the crime Marcus now wanted it to be. Dominic cursed under his breath. Marcus had used a half-truth, twisting an old failure into a present weapon. Rebecca explained the danger. If the media got hold of this, Elena would be painted as the bitter daughter of a corrupt man. Then Elena's phone buzzed. The message read, "Tick-tock. Elena, 23 hours left." She threw the phone against the wall, shattering it. For one wild second, the sound felt good. Then silence returned. Dominic steadied her. "You are not choosing between your father and your freedom. We fight both lies." "How?" she asked. "We have less than a day." Dominic was already dialing. "Then we work fast." He knew someone who could examine the statements. But Elena was done being handled around the edges. "I want every update," she said. "Every call. Every result." Dominic nodded. The team worked through the night. Elena made coffee, sorted pages, marked dates, and wrote down every inconsistency she saw. Near dawn, she broke down. "That's easy for you to say. It's not your family being destroyed." Dominic knelt in front of her. "No," he said. "But Marcus has controlled you through fear for 12 years. Don't to give him one more day." Elena wiped her face and returned to the documents. Rebecca sat beside her and gave her the facts. The case against Marcus did not depend only on Elena's family. He wanted her to believe everything rested on her, because pressure worked best when it felt lonely. Her father offered to confess publicly, hoping to take away Marcus's leverage. "No," Elena snapped. "That is exactly what he wants: panic, shame, and another public mess." She would not let Marcus destroy all of them at once. Then Dominic's phone rang. He listened, his expression sharpening. "You re-sure?" he asked. When he hung up, a slow smile crossed his face. Marcus had made a mistake. The bank statements in the folder were fake. Elena stared at him, afraid to trust hope too quickly. The analyst picked apart the illusion. Some account numbers were real, but the transactions had been fabricated. Marcus had created a paper trail to frame Elena's father. Hope flared in her chest for the first time that day. The casino photos were real, but they were 8 years old. Marcus had changed the context, counting on fear to do the rest. "It is a bluff," Elena realized. Dominic held up his phone. If they exposed the forgery, Marcus' credibility would collapse. Tears ran down Elena's face, but they no longer came from despair. She took one of the fake statements and circled the flaw herself. Marcus had built a trap, and this time she could see the hinge. Now they had to spring it before noon. Rebecca typed rapidly, building the counterattack the next day. They would reveal that Marcus had blackmailed a federal witness using forged documents. With forensic proof, he would look desperate and reckless. "He'll deny it," Elena said. "Of course," it replied. "That's why paper matters ours." One loose end remained. Elena turned to her father. "You need to tell the truth about the affair before Marcus uses it." He looked devastated, and said he could not stain her mother's memory that way. Elena did not soften. "You already did the thing. Silence only lets Marcus own it. If he wanted to protect them now, he had to stop hiding behind shame." Her father lowered his head and nodded. Elena felt no victory. Only the grim relief of choosing truth before someone else weaponized it. Her father seemed to age in front of her, shoulders bent under the truth. Then Dominic's phone buzzed again. Marcus had filed an emergency motion to block Elena's testimony, claiming she was mentally unstable. He wanted a psychiatric evaluation to delay the grand jury. He is trying to create doubt, Rebecca said. The hearing was set for 10 the next morning. Dominic asked if Elena was ready for court. She thought of the headlines, the divorce, the threats, and every attempt Marcus had made to break her. She had survived all of it. Not cleanly, not calmly, but still standing. The courtroom was packed when she entered in a simple navy suit, her makeup minimal. She did not look untouchable. She looked real, and ready to be heard. The judge was sharp and clearly had no patience for theater. Marcus' attorney stood and claimed he had proof of Elena's erratic behavior. When the judge asked for documents, he cited statements from her ex-husband about paranoia. The judge leaned forward. Do you have a medical diagnosis from any professional? The attorney admitted he did not. Her tone turned dry. So you have no medical evidence. Only the word of a man under investigation for fraud. The attorney then claimed he also had statements from Elena's father. Before the lie could settle, Rebecca stood. Your Honor, that is false. Elena looked at her father in the back row. He was pale, ashamed and present. For once he did not look away. Davis had made no such statement. In fact, he had come to testify for his daughter. The judge fixed Marcus' attorney with a cold stare. When pressed for actual evidence that Elena was mentally incompetent, he fumbled and pointed to her public departure from the marriage. The judge's voice turned to ice. A woman leaving an abusive relationship is not mental illness. It is self-preservation. Motion denied. The gavel fell, and Marcus' face darkened. In the hallway, he grabbed Elena's arm and hissed that this was not over. Dominic moved, but Elena spoke before he reached them. Let go, her voice was low, but it carried. Marcus froze. Rebecca called for security. Elena pulled her arm free herself. Dominic stepped between them, only after Elena had already freed herself. Marcus looked from her to Dominic, and for the first time, Elena saw something new in her husband's eyes. Fear, not sorrow. Not love, not regret. Fear of consequences. That night, her father went on local news and confessed to his gambling debts, showing records that proved he had paid the money back. I failed my family, he said through tears. And Marcus collected my failures like weapons to control my daughter. By morning, the story had shifted. Marcus was no longer only the wounded husband. He was being exposed as a man who saved people's shame and waited for the moment it could serve him. The grand jury was set for Monday. Elena spent the weekend preparing with Rebecca, combing through 12 years of secrets. She remembered Marcus taking late-night calls in their bedroom, making problems go away. He had always assumed she was not listening. Then she remembered Alderman Bill Morrison. Marcus had paid him $50,000 for a project, laughing that he was cheap compared to Judge Sullivan. Rebecca froze. Marcus had admitted to bribing a judge. Elena's hands clenched as regret rose through her. She had heard things for years and stayed silent out of fear. Rebecca reminded her that fear had been the point. Elena wrote the memory down anyway. The past could not be changed, but it could finally be used. Monday morning was cold and clear. Elena wore a gray suit and her mother's pearl earrings inside the grand jury room. She swore the oath with a steady voice. For 4 hours she gave away the burden she had carried, describing what she had seen and heard across 12 years. She had been so invisible to Marcus that he had forgotten she was still a witness. When she stepped out, Rebecca said the testimony was strong enough to matter. Not bury him alone, but matter. 2 days later, Marcus was charged with fraud, racketeering, and bribery-related counts. Elena watched the screen as reporters swarmed his home, and he was led out in handcuffs. The shadows he had used were finally turning against him. When Dominic asked how it felt, Elena surprised herself with the answer. Empty. She had expected victory. Maybe relief. Maybe joy. Instead, there was only a hollow space where fear had lived too long. Dominic nodded as if he understood. Stopping Marcus did not erase what he had done. It only stopped him from doing more. Then Rebecca arrived with news from prosecutors. Marcus' lawyers wanted a plea deal. He would give up names, money trails, and officials who had protected him in exchange for fewer years. Elena felt sick. Even cornered, Marcus was turning other people into currency. The prosecutor wanted her position by morning. Elena looked at the city lights and realized there was still one person she needed to face. Even with a deal, Marcus would face 8 years. For a man addicted to power, almost a decade in a cell would feel endless. Rebecca explained that if Elena objected, they could go to trial. A trial meant testifying again in open court. It meant brutal cross-examination. Reporters, cameras, and months of public exhaustion. There was also the chance, however small, that a jury might let Marcus walk. A plea offered certainty, but not the full weight of accountability. Elena paced the room, feeling the old trap of impossible choices. Then she stopped. For 12 years, Marcus had counted on her choosing the quieter pain. This time, she needed to hear him ask for mercy with her own ears. Either way, Marcus would lose his business, his freedom, and the image he had spent his life polishing. He would be a convicted felon forever. Still, Elena needed to see him before deciding. Dominic protested, warning that Marcus would try to manipulate her. Elena stood firm. She was not the frightened woman who once measured every breath by his moods. She would go alone, with guards outside and Rebecca informed. The jail was sterile and freezing. As she waited, her hands trembled, but her resolve held. When Marcus walked in with his wrists cuffed, satisfaction hit her before she could stop it. He looked smaller. The dark power that had once filled every room around him had been reduced to a chair, a table, and 2 guards by the door. Marcus' voice was softer now, almost like the man who used to bring her coffee at dawn and tell her she was the only calm in his life. He said he needed to understand why she had destroyed him. The metal table between them felt like a continent. "I did it because I could," he admitted, as if that explained everything. He believed the world rewarded men like him. When Elena asked if he had ever loved her, he looked tired. "In my way," he said. Then the mask slipped. She had been a placeholder, a beautiful object he owned until something better came along. Elena stared at him and felt a strange calm settle over her. The tenderness she had spent years chasing had always been bait. Elena felt pressure building in her chest. Marcus wanted her to believe she had traded one cage for another, that Dominic was only a more dangerous warden. "You didn't beat me," Marcus said. He did. The words burned because a fragile part of her still doubted her own power. Elena looked down at her hands, at the faint marks her nails had left in her palms over the past weeks. Then she looked back at Marcus. "Dominic opened a door," she said. "I walked through it." Marcus sneered that a dangerous man's kindness did not make her strong. Then as she stood to leave, his smugness cracked. He begged her to support the plea deal, saying 8 years was enough. Elena finally understood that he still thought her mercy belonged to him. Marcus tried to use her morality against her, reminding her she was still the good girl who wanted to do the right thing. When that failed, he reached for shame. He promised to drag every ugly detail of their marriage into court and paint her as the neurotic wife who drove him into other women's arms. His smile was poison, accept the quiet plea he implied, or face public destruction. Elena felt the old instinct rise, the urge to shrink, apologize, disappear. She let it pass through her without obeying it. "I'm not supporting the plea," she said, her voice cold and clear. "Tell whatever lies you want. I'll tell the truth." His face twisted with rage as she called for the guards. The sound of the door opening felt better than any apology he could have offered. "We're done here," Elena said, and the heavy shut on Marcus' threats outside winter sunlight hit her face. And she took her first full breath in years. Dominic was waiting by the car, tense with worry. She told him it was going to trial. Marcus had tried to break her by saying she had only won because Dominic protected her. "He's wrong," Elena said, holding his gaze. "I fought because I chose to." Something shifted in Dominic's eyes, quiet and deep, with the trial 3 months away. Elena began rebuilding the structure of her life. She started therapy, reached out to old friends, and sat down with her father. The work was not cinematic. It was phone calls, hard mornings, nightmares, and choosing not to go back. Over coffee one afternoon, her father told her that her mother would have been proud. Elena snapped. refusing to let him turn her mother into a symbol for this messy public fight. His voice broke. He admitted her mother had stayed through his gambling and his affairs, never choosing herself. "I think she'd be glad you didn't make her mistake," he said, regret heavy in every word. He squeezed Elena's hand and told her she was using the courage her mother had carried but never spent. Elena did not forgive him in that moment, but she did not pull her hand away. As the weeks blurred into legal preparation and security checks, a new feeling quietly took root, under Dominic's steady respect. Elena realized she was beginning to love him. Love after trauma did not arrive like lightning. It came quietly, in safe silences and respected boundaries. It was in the coffee Dominic brought without asking for praise, the way he listened after therapy, the way he never pushed for more than she could give. 3 weeks before the trial, Elena found him on the balcony, staring at the city lights. She asked the question that had been circling her for weeks. Why had he dedicated so much of his wealth to protecting women like her? The silence stretched. Then he told her about his father, a man like Marcus who bought obedience with fear. His mother had tried to leave when Dominic was 8, but his father found them 3 months later and threatened to kill her if she ran again. Dominic's voice went hollow. His mother died 2 years later. Officially, it was a heart attack, but he believed she had simply stopped fighting. His sister later escaped into a toxic marriage of her own, while Dominic built wealth like armor, determined that no one would ever control him again. But power was a poor shield. When his sister took her own life, he realized money had not saved her. So he began funding women who could not safely leave on their own. Elena started to protest, but he corrected her gently. She had survived. That night in the rain, she could have gone back to Marcus. She had not. Dominic had helped, but the first impossible step had been hers. "I would have made it without you," Elena whispered. Dominic shook his head. "The fire had always been in her," he said. He had only made sure the wind did not put it out. Without thinking, she kissed him. It was not planned. It was the release of everything words had failed to hold. When they pulled apart, Dominic warned that it was complicated. He was still healing, and maybe neither of them was ready. But Elena had spent too long living by rules designed to keep her small. "Then we go slowly," she said. "But I don't want to pretend this isn't real." When they crossed that line, there was no rush. Later in his arms, she did not feel completed by a man. She felt seen by one, and still fully herself. When Elena asked about the future, Dominic gave her something she had never been allowed to have: time. She had spent so long becoming what other people needed that she did not yet know what she wanted. "Take your time," he told her. The trial opened on a bitter February morning. Reporters and onlookers crowded the courthouse, hungry for a spectacle. Elena walked through them with her head high. Marcus sat at the defense table, polished and controlled. But when their eyes met, she saw fear beneath the tailoring. The prosecution built its case piece by piece. Experts traced the dirty money, and a corrupt judge admitted taking a $50,000 bribe. Then Elena took the stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and prepared to speak after years of being silenced. The prosecutor was precise, guiding Elena through the timeline of her marriage. They walked through the coercive control, the financial abuse, and the isolation. Elena described 12 years of evidence: late-night calls, smug jokes about bribing officials, expensive dinners where power was traded like currency. Then came cross-examination. Marcus' attorney was a bully in a suit. He tried to frame her escape as an affair and accuse her of inventing abuse to justify Dominic. He sneered and asked why she had stayed 12 years if things were so terrible, why she left only after a wealthy man appeared. Elena took a sip of water. "Because fear does follow a schedule," she said, "and because leaving is most dangerous when everyone believes the man hurting you." On the witness stand, the defense used every familiar tactic: call her unstable, greedy, dramatic, unfaithful. But Elena did not break. Her voice shook once and she let it. Then she kept speaking. She dismantled the idea that Dominic had saved her. He had protected her, yes, but he had not created her courage. For 3 exhausting hours, she turned pain into testimony. When the jury returned a guilty verdict, after only 4 hours the color drained from Marcus' face. Elena sat in the gallery with Dominic's hand near hers, not holding it until she reached for him first. Something inside her finally loosened. Not joy, not triumph. A link had snapped. Marcus' version of her life no longer had power over the room. Sentencing showed the court who Marcus had really been. The judge did not only condemn him for fraud and corruption. She named the control he had exercised over Elena, and the way he had tried to turn the legal system into another cage. When the gavel fell on 18 years in federal prison, Elena did not cheer. This was not a movie ending. She watched Marcus led away and felt heavy relief surrounded by emptiness. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded her. One asked what she wanted other survivors to know. Elena thought of the terrified woman she had been in the rain. "It is never too late to leave," she said. "And you are not weak because it took time. You are alive because you survived long enough to choose." Elena's words traveled farther than she expected. What began as a personal statement became something larger. Women began coming forward, stepping out of shadows that had once felt permanent. Elena became the accidental center of a movement, though the weight of it exhausted her. Alone with Dominic, she admitted she was afraid of becoming a symbol. He reminded her that she did not owe strangers a perfect version of survival. She was a woman who had told the truth, and others were using that light to find their way. 6 months later, Elena turned the attention into a foundation for survivors. On the first night the hotline opened, she sat in the office herself, hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee, waiting for the phone to ring. That was where the cycle began to break. The first call came from a woman named Marissa, whispering from a gas station bathroom with her 2 children waiting in the car. Elena did not give a speech. She asked where Marissa was, whether she was hurt, and if she had her documents. Her father sat nearby, awkward and humbled, arranging a safe ride with a trembling voice. Dominic stood in the hallway, making calls without stepping into Elena's space. By dawn, Marissa and her children were asleep in a safe apartment. Elena stood outside their door and cried quietly, not because the work was finished, but because she finally understood what her money could become. Not status, not revenge. A bridge out. The foundation grew from that first call, slowly then all at once. Elena testified before Congress, but the moment that stayed with her was not the microphone or the cameras. It was Marissa's little boy eating cereal in the shelter kitchen, swinging his feet because he finally felt safe enough to be bored. 2 years into that new life, Dominic asked Elena to marry him. There was no grand performance, no pressure, no audience, just a quiet evening, a simple ring, and a respectful question. Elena asked him to wait 1 year. Survivors can mistake the absence of fear for love, and she needed to know she was choosing from strength, not loneliness. Dominic put the ring away without wounded pride, and that answer told her almost as much as the proposal. Over the next 12 months, Elena learned herself. She traveled alone, painted badly and happily, sat in quiet rooms, and discovered who she was when nobody was watching. She learned she could be happy alone, and that she simply preferred her life with Dominic in it. When he asked again, she said yes. Their wedding was small and private. Later, Marcus sent a venomous letter from prison, trying to pull her back into his old poison. Elena struck a match and watched it turn to ash. It felt less dramatic than she expected and more final. 3 years later, she sat in a hospital room holding her newborn daughter. Dominic said the baby had Elena's fire. Elena smiled and said their daughter would never be taught to make herself smaller to be loved. 5 years passed. The foundation saved thousands, but Elena remembered names more than numbers. Marissa opened a bakery, Sophie. The girl from the cafe volunteered on weekends. Her father answered phones and learned to say, "I believe you," without trying to fix everything. At a small charity dinner, Dominic wrapped his arms around Elena as she watched women laugh over coffee in a room that had once been an emergency shelter. When he asked what she was thinking, Elena traced everything back to that night in the rain. Breaking apart had felt like the end, but it had become the beginning. Help had mattered, love had mattered, but the first step into the storm had been hers alone. Most of us grew up hearing the same fairy tales. A knight arrives, a princess is saved, and love fixes what captivity broke. Elena's life rejected that story. This was the legacy she would give her daughter. Not the tale of a broken woman lifted by a savior, but the truth of someone who walked out shaking, barefoot and terrified, then kept choosing herself one painful step at a time. Dominic did not save her. Elena saved herself, then chose to let him walk beside her. Everything else, the money, the headlines. The noise was background. The real victory was reclaiming her own soul. The hero of her life was not a man at the door. It was the woman who finally opened it.